At 23 years old, I thought the hardest part of starting my engineering career would be proving that I belonged in the room. I did not expect the hardest part to be managing a full grown ass man who was supposed to be mentoring me. This was a work trip that started like any other. Taking a flight, dinner with a colleague, a hotel stay, rental car, and a plan to visit a shipyard the next morning. But somewhere between the drinks, the oversharing, the uncomfortable comments from strangers in the hotel lobby, and him not showing the fuck up the next morning because he was still drunk as shit, I found myself in a situation I had absolutely no idea how to handle. I spent way more time worrying about whether I looked unprofessional than whether he did. This is the story of the work trip where I learned that sometimes being the responsible person is not something you choose. Sometimes it just happens because everyone else has stopped acting like an adult. Welcome back to the podcast. She's been through some engineering shit with your host, Christine, where we keep unlearning all of the outdated career and life advice we never asked for, but somehow managed to absorb anyway. This podcast is about the messy lessons, unforgettable realizations, workplace chaos, career pivots, and life experiences that teach us more than any textbook in engineering school ever could. So grab your coffee, your emotional support beverage of choice, and let's get into today's story. So we're on this work trip, and again, I'm 23 years old. I'm still in that stage of my career where you're trying to prove you're competent, reliable, and not secretly posing as a child trying to be an engineer. Every email feels important. Every meeting feels like an evaluation. Every mistake feels like it could permanently damage your reputation. Meanwhile, my colleague, we'll call him Jim, who is at least 55 years old, has decades of experience, and absolutely should know how professional work dinners operate, decides this dinner is the perfect time to get completely wasted. Not a little relaxed, not had a couple drinks. I mean, fully enters the territory of, I'm about to tell you things that should probably stay between me and my therapist. He starts telling me everything: his marriage, his frustrations, his regrets, his Facebook page, how he got caught by his wife talking to someone on Facebook, like a little messy person that he is, all of his financial problems. And I'm sitting there like, I need to get the fuck out of here. And I'm also thinking, I don't even know how to negotiate my salary yet. I'm still figuring a lot of shit out, and I am not qualified to help you process these life choices. But because I'm 23 and new, I do what most young employees often do. I smile, I nod, I try to be polite. Meanwhile, internally, I'm thinking, how did I become this emotional support employee for Jim? Eventually, we leave dinner and walk through the hotel lobby. He stops to talk to a couple of men at the bar. They look at me and say something along the lines of, wow, she's really pretty. And instead of ignoring the comment or changing the subject, Jim agrees immediately. I remember feeling so uncomfortable, not because of the strangers. It was the fact that someone I was traveling with professionally was making me part of this weird ass conversation. So I didn't stay long at all. And I said something like, okay, I'm going upstairs. Before we went our separate ways, we agreed to meet downstairs in the lobby at 7:30 the next morning. I remember thinking something like, great, tomorrow's a fresh start. We're just going to pretend like tonight never even happened. And spoiler alert, he did not show up at 7:30. Shocker. And he did not show up at 8 a.m. either. Shocker. I show up on time the next morning because, again, I'm 23 and terrified I'm going to get fired and terrified of doing anything wrong. Probably got there at like 7:20. Let's be honest. He is nowhere to be found. Jim's like, am I the fuck A? 5 minutes pass, 10 minutes pass, 15 minutes pass. It's already 8 a.m. We're going to be late to our meeting. And I'm sitting in the lobby realizing I'm no longer waiting for someone who's just late. I'm waiting for someone who may actually still be asleep. At this point in my career, I wasn't in a position where I could just leave and be like, sorry, dude, you're on your own. I needed him. He was the person who was supposed to be training me. So I call the concierge over and I say, can you please contact this person's room? A few minutes later, he answers the phone after a few attempts. And 5 minutes later, he walks right into the lobby. Except he doesn't just look like someone who's overslept and needs an energy drink or an IV of coffee. He looks like someone who continued the previous night's decisions into the morning. He's still drunk. His eyes are glassy. He looks exhausted, like he got ran over by a train. He smells like alcohol. And now I'm in this incredibly strange position of being responsible for getting a 55-year-old man and professional, quote unquote, to a job site. I end up driving us to the shipyard, full on to job site. This is not just, we're not just going to an office where he can, like, not really, there's not a lot of safety risks that he could really get hurt. Like he could have really gotten hurt. Like he's a walking liability at this point because he could fall down, like, the ship decks that are not just regular ass stairwells. Like he could literally go man overboard. I mean, honestly, there were cranes everywhere. There's machinery. We were doing testing. Like he is a full-on liability. But anyway, I don't know what to do. I've never been in this situation. Engineering school doesn't prepare you on how to deal with drunk people. I mean, college does, but this is a whole other ball game. So I end up driving us to the shipyard, and the entire time he's miserable. He's irritated. He's complaining about, there's no heat in the car because it was cold as shit in Wisconsin. We were on this little shipyard, and it was very cold. It was in the dead of winter, and he's, it's too cold. Heat's not working. He's acting like the world personally offended him, and I'm sitting there like, I can't believe this is my life. How did I get here? So we arrive at the shipyard. We're late. It's a mess. And we meet with all the different ship personnel there. And for a little bit, everything seems normal. He kind of just fades into the background. But then it starts. He begins to argue with people. He begins to argue with the ship personnel, including officers, including high-ranking ship personnel, which is one of the worst things you could do. He's not just discussing, he's not just asking them questions or having a debate or a conversation. He's arguing with them, and he is loudly and aggressively arguing with them, and I don't even know what they were arguing about. I feel like it was probably really stupid. It was one of the most uncomfortable things I've ever witnessed at that point in my professional environment. And I wasn't that early. I was so early on into my career. So there wasn't a lot to really compare against, but still, it is one of the top, even as a 35-year adult now, it is one of the top 5 most uncomfortable experiences. Not the top, but it's up there, at least in the top 10. I'm standing there watching all this happen. There's more and more people that are now entering the conversation. I can't even believe that I'm even associated with this situation. He's not doing jack shit. We are really close to finishing what we needed to do, but he is obviously like so not even, he's not with it enough to really do anything. So I'm like, okay, let's just get through this. And I decided not to say anything because, again, I've never been in this situation before. I don't know what the protocol is. I don't report it. I don't tell my boss. And you might ask, why? Why didn't you report it? And it's not that easy. It's not that simple. I was, again, 23 years old. I had just graduated the year before. And at that age, I was convinced that speaking up would somehow hurt my career more than just staying quiet. I was worried that I would be labeled as difficult. I was worried people would think that I couldn't handle working with other people. I worried that somehow his behavior would become my problem. And looking back, I realized how I could have handled it differently, which is one of the reasons why I'm talking about it, in case, hopefully not, but some of you might have already been in this situation or might in the future. I could have asked for help. I could have told someone what was happening. But when you're early in your career, you don't always know where your responsibility ends and someone else's begins, like my boss. If I had called him and said, hey, Jim is drunk as shit. He's going to be kicked off the ship any second now, and I don't know what to do. Guaranteed, I really liked my manager at that time. Guaranteed he would say, okay, Christine, I'll handle this. And, I'll take it from here. I was worried that my name was going to be associated with this, and then Jim was going to be have this vendetta against me. And I respected him for his professional, for his experience. He was very difficult to deal with. Even before this trip, he was really a moody, unpredictable, his personality that day was roll of the dice. So I was just it was a really, really awkward position. But looking back, I could have told my boss. But I understand why I didn't. So then, now this is where the aftermath comes, because the story doesn't just end right here. So a month or two later, I'm on another trip, but Jim is not there with me. One of my one of the few women that was in my department, she actually was on the trip with me, and she was really cool. And there was a bunch of other people within our department there, but Jim wasn't there. And then this guy, one of the organizers of the trip, and he was the one that was coordinating all of the different inspections and testing days throughout the week. We'll call him Mike. Mike was there on the prior trip as well. He was up there when Jim was acting crazy and drunk. And he comes over to me and he says, hey, was he drunk on that last trip? And I immediately knew. Other people noticed. And I knew that, but I didn't think, I don't know what I thought. I just was like, oh, yeah, of course they did. Of course they did. Because he was drunk and he was really smelly and stinky and all the things. And I started to spiral. I started spiraling. Did I look irresponsible? Did this guy Mike think I was okay with it? Did he think that I should have done something? Did he think, all those kinds of similar questions went through my head. And I gave probably the most 23-year-old answer as possible. And I looked at him and I was like, yeah, I think he was, but I'm not sure. Which really translated to, I have no idea what I'm supposed to say here, and I don't want to accidentally ruin his career and my career simultaneously. Which, again, I don't know why I cared about him. But that was the moment I realized something really important. And it wasn't some, the clouds parted and this huge aha moment. I think over time, I realized that I wasn't responsible for him. I wasn't a babysitter. I wasn't responsible for managing other people's decisions and choices, which is hard to do when you're that young. And as women, we tend to downplay a lot of things and try to smooth things over because we think it's easier, and especially uncomfortable situations. So this was something that it just didn't click. But over time, it was something that I learned more about and learned from. I was just a young engineer trying to do my job while someone else made a series of decisions that put everyone around him in an extremely uncomfortable position. So that's the story of the work trip, where I learned that sometimes you become the responsible person by default, no matter how young you are. Not because you're the most experienced, not because you're the person in charge. Sometimes it's simply because someone else stops acting like they understand the assignment. If you've ever been the youngest person in the room and somehow ended up being the adult, I want to hear your story. What is the most unprofessional thing you've ever seen happen at work, and how did you handle it? Leave a comment or call the podcast voicemail at 267-281-3633. That's 267-281-3633. And tell me your chaotic workplace story, your nightmare coworker story, or situation where you thought, I can't believe this is happening. Your story might even be featured in a future episode where we can all learn from it. Until then, keep questioning the outdated career advice that we all somehow absorbed. And remember, just because someone has more experience doesn't always mean that they have better judgment.